So our next guest is Filippo Prini, who is a project leader at Boston Consulting and a core member of the fashion and luxury practice. And now I want to actually talk about fashion specifically with someone who works in fashion specifically now. So Filippo, first of all, can we have an overview of the fashion industry as a whole? Sort of how much revenue does it generate, and also the fashion industry generates a lot of jobs. So can we talk about that a little bit, please?
Sure. So I think when looking at a bit of the numbers of let's say the fashion and luxury industry as a whole, we need to really think about to use a three time horizon lenses. So everything that was before 2019 and before, so the last let's say 10 years ending in 19, then what happened in 1920, and then hopefully what will happen in the next couple of years. If we look at the overall size in terms of euro values or dollar values, we have roughly, let's say, a fashion luxury industry that is in the $1,000 billion range in 19. This, especially when looking at the luxury part, it's not just personal, let's say, item, but it's also made of experiential goods. So everything that is not particularly related to the personal, let's say, purchases. And the last 10 years have looked at the fashion and luxury industry growing quite significantly at CAGR, ranging from 4 to 8%, depending on how you cut these figures. Then COVID happened last year, and a massive drop was experienced by this industry that honestly, maybe after a few others such as travel and tourism, was one of the most affected one, given that stores were closed, and one of those, and it was one of those goods that that was more quickly replaced by others. And here we are talking about a drop of year on year that has been quite unprecedented, and ranging from 20 to 30% ranges for everything that is personal goods, so clothes and such, to even ranges from 40 to 60% that everything that is experiential, so from skincares and many others items that or experiences that fall into that group. And then luckily we have seen that the recovery time that is expected for many of these falls are quite different when looking at a geographical level. So countries are reacting very differently. We all know how China quickly reacted to this drop, and actually is ended the year at par level. Other countries such as Italy, UK, France, I mean, they're experienced, a fall whose bad results will be mitigated not before end of next year. So it's from a number perspective, unfortunately, it's not a very happy moment, and from a job perspective, if that was your second part of the question, yes, for sure, the fashion and luxury industry gives a lot of, impacts a lot the occupation of these countries that we just talked about. With stores being closed, continuous lockdowns, uncertainty on whether or not there will be another lockdown, and I'm specifically talking about the European countries. companies are very scared of continuing their developing of their footprint, and therefore a lot of jobs are being lost, and I don't expect this trend to change in the immediate next future.
Thank you. Now, of course, COVID has negatively impacted the fashion industry, but it also has changed the fashion industry. We've seen an increase in technology, changes in the way that technology is used. And also, I assume some countries that maybe were not ready for that technological change, they had to dive into it because they had no other choice. Now, what structural changes in both consumers and companies are expected to remain after the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think this is a very interesting question to look at, because if we talk about negative impacts, there are some. We must also look at the bright side, and here there are some quite good impacts on an industry that has been more resilient, especially in some countries such as the Western European one, France, Italy, Spain, that have been historically more resilient to let's say a digital adoption, so e-commerce adoption of from a consumer behavioral point of view. So if I think about the impacts that this is having, so the lack of tourism, so people traveling significantly less and purchasing significantly less outside of their home countries, and this is very heavily driven if we segregated and look only at the luxury fashion and luxury segment, where Chinese make 50% of the market when traveling abroad. Of course, it pushed companies to rethink their local approach and their local product offering. So I think one of the structural changes we've seen is that if the last 20 years have been a continuous push towards a globalization of your product offering, meaning people could find in any specific stores of their brand, of their favorite brand, pretty much a very similar assortment and prices throughout the world. So I think this is definitely changing. Brands are creating a more global, let's say, product offering to accommodate the needs of the various countries or regions. So probably what you will find in the assortment that you will find now in the next few months and years in China will be different than the one in some European countries, and it will be different from the one you find in the US. So to me, this is the first big change. The second change, I think that is worth mentioning, and it's the e-com adoption. Fashion brands were already moving towards that direction, while luxury brands have always been very adverse and lacking behind in terms of providing this kind of offering to their clients, leveraging the digital channels, both proprietary channels such as the brand.com, but also third parties or marketplaces, for example. What this means is, of course, to enhance this digital adoption, you need to a bit review your sort of a go-to-market model with your consumers. And one of the trends that we have seen at BCG and we've seen a lot of brands investing time, money, and resources in it is, for example, the virtual engagement of their audience. What I mean by virtual engagement is that so a little bit leveraging store personnel that is not working or is working significantly less than with regular foot traffic. They're offering sort of streaming and virtual shopping experience to their loyal customers, or creating virtual content that consumers can access. So presenting, for example, new products online, engaging CRM customers online with private or groups online sessions. And more broadly, for example, another trend that goes into that direction is for sure the gamification of the shopping experience. We have seen that many brands, both fashion and luxury, have created and entered like through video games to engage audiences in this new digital ecosystem. And I think this is impacting also the way brands should think their internal organization, because you will need more and more digital capabilities, and as we know, the digital go-to-market is significantly different than let's say a retail traditional go-to-market.
Right, thank you. Now, I think to go back into politics a little bit, again, I think we need to consider Brexit again. So what impact will Brexit have on the fashion industry, both global and in the UK? Because British brands tend to be smaller, they tend to be very innovative and younger designers, but they are smaller. So maybe sort of tariffs that a bigger brand could just sort of overlook, will they really impact the British fashion industry?
Yeah, so this is another big question that, of course, nobody has a crystal ball to know what's going to happen with this unprecedented change. I have to echo the words that have been said a few minutes ago, that it is really a pity seeing this UK exiting Europe, and from our point of view, this will have negative impacts on large brands, but especially, as you said, on smaller brands. So to answer your question, I think from one point of view, many of the larger brands are kind of creating task forces within their organization to understand a bit better and try to prevent as much as possible the negative impacts that Brexit will have, specifically on the implication on flow of goods, taxes, duties, warehouses set up, the deliveries of e-commerce, for example, we just talked about, from UK to EU mainland. But from a certain point of view, I mean, once again, having a large monetary power helps you some sort of creating ad hoc functions within an organization to deal with this. What's sure is that, of course, there will be a lack of talent. We know that when you close the borders or you reduce the flow of borders, you reduce the number of talents you can recruit. And this is true for large brands, and this is true for small brands. One thing that I believe will have a negative impact on both sized, let's say, type of brands, is that, you know, especially when thinking about, let's say, tourism generating a lot of revenues when shopping in the UK, the fact that UK is exiting Europe, this will prevent to offer tax-free shopping. And tax-free shopping, we know that, especially in the last 10 years, has been one of growing significantly. Has been one of the key driver for purchases abroad. I think this will furthermore impact the negative impacts that this industry is experiencing. So, you know, first you have the COVID-19 travel restriction, then you have Brexit, and now you also you also lose the incentives of tax-free shopping. So those three things combined is quite a big limit to tourists flows and their shopping powers on the UK floor. So unfortunately on this, I think I really cannot see any positive impacts from this decision and Brexit.
Okay, that is very interesting. Now, I want to move about and talk about young consumers specifically. Of course, we've seen consumers being young people being very interested in a company's sustainability policies, but we talk about it strictly in terms of the environment. However, this year, last year, especially, we've seen a lot of social movements that were led by young people. Now, is having sort of progressive political views and is being vocal about them beneficial for a brand? Not that it has to be done just for sort of marketing purposes, but do young consumers actually pay attention to what a brand says about certain social issues?
Sure. So on a like among the many the main study BCG publishes yearly, the BCG and Alta Gamma consumer report, where we interview 12,000 more fashion and luxury respondents, tells us that 50+% of these 12,000 people, fashion addicted, say that sustainability is more than ever likely to impact their purchases than it used to do before. And to your point, this is on an average across all age groups. When you look at specific younger ages, so from Generation Z to millennials, that 50 closely becomes, it's closer to 100. What this means is that now more than ever, consumers are paying a lot of attention on luxury and fashion brands' purpose and contribution to society. So it goes well beyond the traditional, let's say, meaning of sustainability that was focusing only on environmental and animal welfare. They care about the environmental causes such as climate change, and actually they take that into consideration throughout their purchases. They want their brands, they expect their brands to have evolved towards a holistic view of sustainability on a 360 degrees and want purpose and responsibility from their brand. So I think COVID-19 also helped brands to kind of a little bit refocus on that, given that, you know, with closed markets, they had the time also to act on it. I mean, if you looked at the larger groups, now all of them have within one of their, let's say, core functions, let's say a sustainability team dedicated to making sure that production, that there is, also from a communicational point of view, that there is purpose in what they're doing. And I believe that this is partially because of, you know, their agendas, but I have to admit that in the last years, younger generations have really shifted their purchases from brands that were not embracing fully this sustainability and this, let's say, responsibility theme towards brands that they were communicating, that they were doing something actively for it. And at the end, I think those brands that moved earlier on will be able to collect gains in the very short term, and at the end will attract, will make these consumers loyal, considering their the fact that younger generation, of course, have a higher lifetime value than older generations.